Welcome to the Science and Spirituality Podcast, where we dive deep into universal spiritual principles and ground them in modern science. My name is Chris Carden.
And my name is Kevin Carden. And we are committed to simplifying the spiritual side of success for you with easy to understand scientific research so you could walk away with practical tools to create radical transformations in your life. Let's get started.
All right, today we have a special episode because we're actually answering a listener question. So right off the bat, if anyone has questions, please submit them to either me or Kevin on Instagram. DM us, like we're happy to answer it, and it gives us content to talk about. And we want to talk about things that you guys care about. So this question comes from one of my followers, and he asks, "What's the difference between being aware and being spiritually conscious?"
Yeah, so let's get into it. Before I share my perception of what it is, and we'll dive deeper, and Chris and I will just go back and forth of what we think it is. But just think to yourself, like, well, what would you say?
Mm-hmm.
What would you think is the difference between being aware and being spiritually conscious? So with that in mind, as your brain starts percolating on that idea, my awareness or my belief about it, my perception, let's go with that, is that awareness is where we just talking about this before the podcast. It's like awareness is awareness. Like when you're aware, you're aware. Like, well, like how do you define that? Actually, you're looking up the definition. I'm curious to know when you notice something.
Okay, so awareness is the knowledge or perception of a situation or fact.
Okay. Yeah. So like you could become aware. This is where it starts to get into spiritually conscious, but it's different. I really believe it's different. But when we're aware of not only say like a situation, we're aware of our feelings, or even more importantly, we're aware of our thoughts. That's awareness. But for me, what I understand is spiritually conscious is where we take the awareness to another level. Because who is it within you? Who is it within me that can become aware of my thoughts, that can become aware of my emotions?
That aren't those things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll go through now. Actually, I'd love to share that exercise to actually help people tap into that spiritual nature. But ultimately, when you're spiritually aware, you're realizing that you, the spiritual being, is the one who is aware of your thoughts and your emotions. And there's great power to that. And we can dive deeper into that. But the very basis of it is, I believe, the difference that if you're spiritually conscious, that means you're aware. But if you're aware, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're spiritually conscious. You're not actually being conscious of that you are a spiritual being. Because there's plenty of people aware. And I think this is like the first stage of our soul's evolution, our spiritual development, is personal development, where we start to realize that we can direct our thoughts and our emotions and change them and become emotionally intelligent and all that stuff. So it's great. But going that next level is where there's even deeper power. And I want to dive into that. But what are your thoughts on that, Chris?
Well, we've talked about awareness a lot on our podcast. I don't know if we've ever had a specific episode on awareness, but I feel like it comes up in a lot of different aspects of what we talk about, because I've mentioned it before many times here, is that awareness, you need to have awareness before you can have a lot of the other things that we talk about on this podcast. You need to be first aware that you can change something. You need to be aware of your thoughts. You need to be aware of your emotions. You need to be aware of your feelings before you can sit in the seat of power and then direct them.
Mm-hmm.
Awareness, it allows you to step into that point of the locus of control, and then you could switch where you want to place your attention.
Exactly.
So I feel like awareness is the precedes spiritual consciousness, which is I think what you were getting at. Definitely. And I think they're both practices. It's because just personally in my life, I feel like I'm aware more than I'm spiritually conscious, because there's so many times, like you mentioned, Kev, where I have awareness of my feelings or my thoughts or whatever, but then I don't take it to the next step and use that awareness to kind of pivot myself out of it, or do something that's for my highest good in that situation. Sometimes I have the awareness that I'm like, I'm feeling super anxious. I also have this thought of what I can do for my higher self, but then sometimes I just go watch Netflix instead, and I kind of sit it. So I feel like it's definitely like a step. It's like awareness first and then spiritual consciousness, and both of them are practices. And so unless you're like the Buddha or like Jesus, it's really hard to live in those states all the time. So I kind of want to bring that up too, that it's a practice, and the more you do it and the more you like practice it, the better you become at it. But you're never going to be perfect at it. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, no one is. And even like you bring up like Jesus and Buddha and these enlightened masters of metaphysics, is I believe, and I've been diving into this a lot more with books like I would highly recommend. What book is that? I really started to dive into this with the Sermon on the Mount by Emmett Fox, really powerful, as well as The Pathway of Roses by Christian D. Larson. And these books are talking about that the Christ consciousness, not Jesus Christ, not the man, but the consciousness that man developed, or Buddha developed, or many other masters or gurus, whatever you want to call them, they developed. That is our birthright. Mm-hmm. That's what I really want to just like pinpoint, is that like, I agree with you, Chris, that it's a challenge. It is hard because there's only been a handful of people in the world that really like quote unquote mastered it. But I will say, I learned this so I went to Israel this past February. It feels like a lifetime ago. So February 2020, and
pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID, exactly. And I was there with a group of pilgrims. We were on a pilgrimage, a spiritual journey, an outward journey for an inward experience. And our mentor, Mary Morrissey, was leading that pilgrimage. And we were at the site of Jesus's tomb. And there was a tour guide taking us around and giving us his teaching on the history, but everyone has their own perception, right? And when he was describing when Jesus was on the cross, he said that there was a moment that Jesus was disconnected from God, where he said like, oh, like why have you forsaken me? Mm-hmm. Like he had that like a tiny bit of doubt, right? So even that master still had trouble with coming from the spiritual consciousness of that all is one, that this is exactly how it's meant to be. Like it's okay. Like I'm more than this. And so I bring that up because I asked Mary about that after. It's like, wait, why did he say that, Jesus was disconnected? And Mary gave a good answer. She was like, well, like, again, remember, everyone has their own perception. And her perception was that he wasn't disconnected. He was just in his human nature at that point. Because we're never disconnected from God. Like God is always with us. The universe is always with us. Life is literally always breathing us. So there's no such thing as disconnection that way. But we, in our human nature, must consciously connect. And that, I think, is really where it comes to the spiritually conscious, where we're being in connection with that higher self of ourselves, like that we are, and knowing that we are that spiritual being, and not being wrapped up in the human thoughts, the emotions, even the pain, the physical pain, like the end that Jesus went through. So like, not to get super religious at all, like again, just kind of pointing out main things that again resonated with me. This is not like this is exactly, what it is. Like this is meant to be. Like if it resonates with you, great. If it doesn't, throw it out. Like this is not meant to be like this is what it's right or wrong. We're just talking on this podcast. So just want to make that disclaimer just in case.
Yeah. I mean, the whole time you were talking, I feel like you were more using it from like a metaphorical perspective, not religious.
Yeah.
Like you were using it as an example to yeah. I mean, I was just thinking, Julie and I are watching Avatar, and the episode we watched last night was the season 2 finale where he meets the guru and goes through all the chakras.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminded me of similar to what we're talking about, where he, as the avatar, like had the awareness of all the, like he knew about the chakra system and he had the awareness of it, but then the master showed him how to use the awareness then to step into the spiritual consciousness side of it and unlock the avatar state. And he's like, you like basically, this is your birthright, like as the avatar. Exactly. And I think it's a metaphor for all of us too, is that we have that access to that spiritual side of us. But the first step is having that awareness of it. And then the next step above that is using the awareness as a stepping stool to get you to that higher level and that higher state.
Exactly.
And I think that's why meditation is so like helpful for a lot of people, because it gives you that chance to sit and hone your awareness skills, I would say, because then you can sit, because when you're sitting long enough in meditation, there comes a point where it's like a thought will come across and you'll totally realize that you're the one looking at that thought rather than the thought itself. And it's like, whoa, what the heck is happening?
Yep.
It's kind of weird.
Yeah. It's powerful. That's what I actually really believe what spiritual awakening is. That you're awakening to your spirituality and who you really are as a spiritual being. and nothing is the same after that. Like, I want to just to give an experience of this. If I want to go into just a short exercise on how, like, this is true, like, because we could talk about this all day, but you listening have to have the experience in order to really ground in what we're talking about, the difference between awareness and then spiritually conscious. So if you're in a good place that you can close your eyes, then I invite you to do so. I'm going to do the same, even though you can't see me, where this is just audio. And I invite you to take a deep breath. Just relax your body. And start to just notice your body. Notice your body in space, whether you're sitting, standing, walking, wherever you are. Notice your feet, the soles of your feet. Notice the bottoms of your feet. Notice then your left kneecap. And bring your attention, your noticing ability to your right shoulder. And then your left shoulder. Notice the tippy tip of all 10 fingers. And then notice the tip of your nose. Just notice your body without judgment. Just notice. Now, take your noticing faculty and bring your awareness to your thoughts. What thoughts have you been thinking over the last 30 seconds through this exercise? Without judgment, just notice. Could be thoughts of, well, where the heck is Kevin going with this? Or this is interesting, this is boring, oh, I've done this before. Whatever thoughts that are flowing through your consciousness, just notice. Don't judge them, just notice. Now, we take it a layer deeper. You just practice your ability to become aware, your awareness. Now, let us become spiritually conscious. Notice that you could notice your body. Notice that you had the ability to notice each of those places that I mentioned, like the bottom of your feet, your kneecap, your shoulder, tips of your fingers, tips of your nose. Notice that. And now, even more powerfully, you can notice that you can notice your thoughts. You as the spiritual being, have the ability to notice what you're noticing. And then ask yourself this final question to really lock it in. Who is it within you that can notice your thoughts, but is not your thoughts? Because just by the very fact of noticing that, you can notice. Who is it within you that can notice your thoughts? Who is it within you that can notice your body, but is more than your body? My friend, this is you. This is your spiritual nature, who you really are. This is you becoming spiritually conscious. And as you notice what you're noticing, then you can shift, you can change, you can choose anew. You can notice the patterns of thoughts that you're in that are contractive. You can notice the emotions, the habits. Notice all this and notice that you're noticing. So then you can come back to, as Chris mentioned, the locus of control, which you get to choose. So I invite you to take one more deep breath and ground that awareness. And then you can gently open your eyes. So that's it. That's the experience. And what's interesting, I've done that exercise many, many times. But funny, I actually never really realized that the first level is the awareness. that you can notice those thoughts or emotions, but the noticing what you're noticing is where you tap into the spiritual consciousness. Right. I really like that distinction. So whoever asked that question,
I was literally gonna say that that's the perfect example, because like if you let's just attach like a real world example to it, like being anxious or scared or angry.
Yeah.
You can, the first step, the awareness is like, I'm angry.
Yep.
But then the next step above that is you noticing that you're angry and then asking yourself, do I want to feel angry? Or is it worth me putting my energy towards this anger?
Yeah.
Sometimes the answer could be yes, but it's just having that awareness of noticing that you're angry versus you just being angry, or noticing that you're noticing you're angry. Yeah.
Exactly.
So there's that distinction there. And I think since you went through that exercise and you talked slowly through it, I feel like it was easier to connect that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because again, it's got to be an experience. And like a simple, very, very simple example to like really bring it in is like, I had struggled in the past with caffeine addiction. I would drink caffeine all the time. And for, it was like, I think last year and a half ago, that I wanted to stop drinking caffeine for good. And I wanted to quit. And that's an addiction. Like that's a physiological addiction. Right. And so I was really good with it. I stopped drinking coffee, and I started to notice that I had that craving for coffee. Right. But I only just noticed it. I had the awareness. And after a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I wasn't really grounded in the new version of myself I wanted to be. And so I slipped back into old patterns. I started to drink coffee again. And this happened 2 or 3 times until I started to realize I wasn't spiritually conscious of what I really wanted and why I really wanted it. I wasn't noticing what I was noticing in the moment that I was experiencing that craving. So I'd notice the craving, but I wasn't noticing that I was noticing the craving, which takes that step back. And it's easier with this spiritual consciousness. It's way easier to make the decisions that you want that are in alignment with who you want to be. And so once I started to tap into that more and more, it was like super easy. I mean, it was still noticing the challenge of getting over that craving. But since I was rooted in the spiritual consciousness, I wasn't listening to my body anymore of the cravings. I was listening to what I, as a spiritual being, really wanted, which was freedom from that addiction. So yeah, it's powerful. It's powerful stuff, and it can affect every area of your life if you let it. Mic drop.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's what I got on this. It's, pretty straightforward once you get down to it, but like it takes some, actually, this is the last thing I'll say about it. And if you have anything else, if not, we can end the episode. But that, as one thing you mentioned earlier, Chris, is that it's a practice. It's not something that is just like, oh, I got it now. Like, because we're so trained to think that we are our personality. Like, I'm Kevin Carden, you're Chris Carden, right? Like, we're so trained to think we're our names, or we're our body, we're our thoughts, all of that. And it's not like someone literally is like training us like, you are this. It's just ingrained in our programming as a human being. But when we start to tap into this, we gain like tiny little bits of this experience of who we really are. But it's like we have to build up that power into really knowing this as who we are as a spiritual being, and bring that into the experiences that we have. And that's, I believe, a lifelong journey. So it's not something you can really just like master within one day, or even a year, or even 10 years. Like, I'm still working on it. You're still working on it. I can honestly say that I've been working with this tool of becoming spiritually conscious for very seriously for the last 6 years. I've been spiritually awakened for the last like 7 or 8 years, but really getting fine-tuned with this tool that I learned from our mentor, Mary Morrissey, for the last 6 years. And it's still a growing process, you know? So take this and really work with it, but remember that this is something you have to always come back to. That's not going to be easily mastered, but it's worth it. You can change your life with it.
Sweet. Let's end it there.
Okay, sweet. Well, we'll see you all in another episode. Work on your spiritual consciousness, become more aware, and we'll talk with you soon. And that's it for today. So thanks for tuning in, and we really hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed recording it. So any questions, any comments, just connect with us on Instagram. You could always DM us at Kevin Francis Carden
and at Chris J. Carden. And also, if you feel guided to, the one thing we do ask is for you to please rate the podcast and leave us a review. This way we can reach more people and impact more lives with this amazing information. With that, we'll see you on the next episode.